Operation Chastise was an attack on German dams carried out on the night of the 16th of May 1943 by the 617th Squadron of the Royal Air Force, later called the Dambusters, using special bouncing bombs. The Möhne and Edersee dams were breached, causing catastrophic flooding of the Ruhr Valley. 2 hydroelectric power stations were destroyed and several more damaged. An estimated 1,600 civilians, about 600 Germans and 1,000 forced laborers were killed by the flooding. Estimates show that before May of 1943, steel production on the Ruhr was 1 million tons. This dropped to a quarter of the level after the raid. That night, employing just a few bombers, the British came close to a success which would have greater than anything they had achieved hitherto with a commitment of thousands of bombers. Immediately after the British raid, a German plan was developed against the Soviet military infrastructure. Key supporters of this air raid were Albert Speer, the Minister of Armaments and War Production, and Major Werner Baumbach, one of the most successful bomber pilots of the Luftwaffe, who was responsible for the destruction of over 300,000 gross registered tons of Allied shipping. Since the Soviet energy supply was concentrated in a few but very large power plants, the focus of planning was on shutting down the power plants that were to be attacked with the German Fritz X remote-controlled drop bomb. Fritz X was the world's first precision-guided weapon deployed in combat. It was first deployed in July of 1943 in a raid in Sicily. It was estimated that a power outage in the Moscow Upper Volga area alone would result in a production loss of 80% for tank engines, 60% for motor vehicles, and 50% for electronic and optical equipment. The psychological impact of a strong German bomber formation in the depth of Russia was also emphasized. The most important target of Operation Eisenhammer or Iron Hammer was the Rybinsk hydroelectric power plant, which received energy from the Volga River. At the time of construction, it was the second largest hydroelectric power station in the Soviet Union and one of the most powerful power plants in the country. It played a vital role in providing Moscow with electricity during the Great Patriotic War, especially during the Battle for Moscow. The construction of the station started in 1935, mainly by forced laborers of the Gulag. The filling of the reservoir started in April of 1941 and continued until 1947. After the planned raid, only 2 small energy centers beyond the Ural and in the Soviet Far East would have remained intact, because at the time the Soviet Union lacked the capacity to manufacture turbines. Due to the shortage of bombers and fuel and the capture of forward bases by the Red Army, the plan was repeatedly postponed. However, in early 1945, the Operation Eisenhammer was resurrected. Mistral long-range bombers were brought in to achieve this goal. Mistral or Mistral II was the large unmanned component of a composite aircraft configuration developed in Germany during the later stages of World War II. The composite comprised a small piloted control aircraft mounted above a large explosive-carrying drone, the Mistral, and as a whole it was referred to as the Beethoven-Gerät, or Beethoven device. The combination would be flown to its target by a pilot in the fighter, then the unmanned bomber was released to hit its target and explode, leaving the fighter free to return to its base. The first such aircraft flew in July of 1943 and was promising enough to begin a program by the Luftwaffe, eventually entering operational service. The cockpit was removed and it was replaced with a hollow charge of 3.6 tons with a distant fuse known as the elephant trunk. 75 Junkers 88 aircraft were planned for the first Mr. program, and altogether more than 200 Misters were built. However, notable successes were not achieved. The clumsiness of the Mistel required very strong German fighter protection. In the autumn of 1944, 60 Misters were massed at a Danish airfield for the attack on the British Home Fleet at Scapa Flow. However, bad weather repeatedly prevented the long flight across the sea. After the sinking of the battleship Tirpitz in November of 1944, the British fleet abandoned the base and the Mistel attack was abandoned as the target no longer existed. Kampfgeschwader saw Bomber Wing 200, a special bomber unit within the Luftwaffe, gathered about 100 Mistel bombers near Berlin in 1945 and waited for favorable weather to attack the targets around Moscow. But a US air raid on the main military aviation test center at Rechlin destroyed 18 Mistel aircraft, after which the plan was again shelved and finally cancelled altogether. The last missions were flown against the bridges over the Oder River in the spring of 1945. The Rybinsk hydroelectric power station remained intact.